Forged by pain, lifted by joy. Every challenge shapes us. Every triumph defines us. Life is a journey of resilience, growth, and transformation. Join us as we speak with remarkable people who've walked this path, facing adversity with courage and embracing victories with gratitude. Their stories are those of perseverance, strength, and inspiration, a testament to the power of the human spirit. Join us as they share their journey, offering wisdom, encouragement, and a reminder that every struggle can lead to a greener purpose.
Hey, welcome to Courageous Protectors. My name is Louis Arnold. I am happy that you're here with us today. I have a special guest, Denis Beauséjour. I hope that you hear his story, you're encouraged, you're inspired, and you're ready to get out here and tackle the world. So how are you doing this morning, Denis?
Louis, I'm doing great. It's good to be with you and your listeners today.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you. It is an honor that you're here. Not only are you a friend, you're a good friend with my father. You were a pastor. You pastored a church. You pastored that. I attended that church for some time. So I was able to sit under your teaching and, a church that's being led well now by Jamie Moore. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And if you can, man, we like to start off with just sharing, people sharing their story. So if you could just start at the beginning.
Sure, I'd love to. And I'm really glad to be good friends with your dad and your family. And we do miss you, Louis. We miss you. I know you guys moved, so that's good. Let's start at the beginning. I was born in Campbellton, New Brunswick, a little town on the northern part of New Brunswick, which is a province of Canada, on the border with Quebec. And I lived in New Brunswick for about 3 years. And then when I was about 3, we moved to Ottawa, the capital of Canada. My dad and mom were both working when I was a kid. My dad was a former member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And after he got married, he got a job as an insurance adjuster. And so, and my mother was a manager of a aluminum building supplies company, office manager. We lived in a lower middle class project of townhouses on the east side of Ottawa. And I had 3 little sisters. So it was, I'd say a very happy, normal childhood. I didn't know I was lower middle class at that time. I went to a French immersion Catholic grade school. So I became bilingual, English and French. We spoke English at home, and in the neighborhood was mostly English, and we were 100% French at school. So by the time I was 8 or 9, I was fluently bilingual, and we had a very simple lifestyle. And my great love at that time was hockey. I played ice hockey all winter, and our winters were very severe in those days. Like we would get 30 to 40 feet of snow over the whole winter season. Our streets, you couldn't plow them like the plows that you see in Cincinnati. You had to use snow blowers, and they would blow the snow into your front yard. And eventually your front yard would be like 10 or 15 feet high of snow. And then you would pack it all down and make tunnels and make forts and have snowball fights. And on the street, you'd play street hockey, ball hockey. And then after school, and when it got cold enough, the local rink was an outdoor rink, just a 5-minute walk from my house. So I spent my whole life as a child at the rink all day, playing hockey, come home for lunch, go play hockey, come home for dinner, and go play hockey. They had lights, so we could play in the evenings as well before bedtime. So it was a very cool childhood. I was learning a lot. Uh, our school was really small, and when I got to finished grade one, the grade two class was pretty large, but there was hardly anybody in grade three. So they moved me into grade three. So I skipped grade two, and then they did that again in grade seven. They joined us up with the grade eight class, and I ended up finishing first in my class. So I ended up skipping grade seven. And so I went to high school when I was 12. And
Hmm.
now in those days, we had to do 5 years of high school. So grade 13. They've kind of
Wow.
synced up with the US system now. It's just grade 12. But in those days, we had grade 13. So after 5 years of high school, I graduated and went to Queen's University there in Kingston, about a couple hundred miles down the road towards Montreal. Um, and by this time, we were living in Toronto. My parents moved from Ottawa to Toronto. So here I was in high school, 12 years old, 5'2", about 120 pounds. And I remember my first day in gym class, I was sitting beside uh, Andy Longo. He was a normal, grade 9, 14-year-old kid, Italian dude, and he had a 5 o'clock shadow by about 11 o'clock in the morning. He'd been shaving since grade 6,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was the hairiest guy I'd ever seen. And I had basically zero hair at this time. I was like, I hadn't gone through puberty yet, so it was excruciating. But anyway,
Mm.
life rolled on. I went to college, as I said, and my parents did not go to college, and I think that was a significant challenge for them in finding high income work. And so my mother was like routinely pounding away, like, you need a good education and you need to work hard. So she knew a lady who worked at McDonald's, and I got a job there as soon as I turned 14. Um, Worked at McDonald's all the way through high school, worked at McDonald's all the way through college, 50 hours a week.
Mm.
Now, in those days, Canada colleges, books, and everything, and tuition was like, $6,000. It wasn't, you could earn that much money if you worked hard. So I got through college, working at McDonald's, and paying my way through, and then uh, didn't have any debt at the end, and got a job at Procter and Gamble because the guy that owned our McDonald's, he had won when I was a freshman at college, and when I graduated 4 years later, he owned 5 McDonald's.
Mm.
And I helped him open the new stores, train store managers, and he kept telling me, he showed me about local marketing, and he kept telling me near the time of my graduation, you need to work at Procter and Gamble. They are the Green Berets of marketing. You need to go there. So I kind of set out to get a job there. So got a job at P&G and in marketing and brand management. And I had no idea how good the company was and how much opportunity that job, was going to give me. But anyway, it had opportunity and it also had challenge. So now by this time, it became clear that my dad, my mom and dad were both heavy smokers, and my dad was unfortunately falling into alcoholism, and
Mm.
things got really rough. And I didn't see all of it because I was away at college. But by the time I finished college and came back to Toronto to start working at Procter and Gamble, my dad had to have his pancreas surgically removed. So he was a surgical diabetic, and he continued to drink, and it really was a major, major uh, loss for our family and for him and my mom. They separated, and all kinds of challenges. We had him live with us for a while, but he wouldn't stop drinking or smoking in our house, and he almost burned our house down one night.
Wow.
Uh, And I'd said, just don't smoke in my house, And anyway, long story. Um, by the time I was started at P&G, I could really tell my family was in a downhill spiral. My three little sisters took the brunt of it. Um, they didn't get the chances to go to college. Well, they went to community college. Um, but by the time they were 18, 19, 20, they, they wanted to get out. And so they got married young. And, for a while there, my dad sort of stabilized and my sisters were happily married. And I was dating my future wife at that time. Um, so we kind of went through a real downturn, and then it came kind of back to stability. And met my wife Mary Ann at P&G. She came 2 years after me, but she was from another college. She had her master's of business administration, and she was amazing. She was a leader, an athlete, and even between her undergraduate degree and her MBA, she was Miss Canada for a year.
Mm.
She traveled around representing Canada. So just an amazing resume. And when I met her, she was so humble, so unaffected by her success in athletics, her success at school, her social success as Miss Canada. And uh, I knew I wanted to marry her real quick. It took her a little bit of time, um, but we got married about 2 years later, and so that brings me kind of to the first part of my story, of just learning to work hard, learning to get a good education. Thank you to my mother. Learning to weather a lot of family storms. Um, uh, Learning to look out for my little sisters.
Yeah.
In all of that, and yeah, so that was kind of the first chapter, and that led to kind of chapter two is a super successful career at P&G in Canada. And about 10 years in, they sent me to be the general manager of Procter & Gamble in Australia and New Zealand, but it was located in Sydney, Australia. So by this time, we had two boys that were both born in Toronto. And now we went to Sydney, and we had bought a company, Richardson Vicks, that had operations in 40 countries where P&G didn't have any operations. So they all of a sudden needed 40 young managers to move up to general management. So it was a huge opportunity. So I went to Australia, and our third son was born there. We were there for 4 years, and it was during this time that some of my, you know, uh, upbringing, uh, and some of my own challenges started to show. Um, I would drink too much.
Mm.
Um, I had, what I found out later was a sex addiction. Um, I had wandered away from, uh, church, going to college. I, started going back to church when I met and married Marianne. I was Catholic, she was Protestant, and we went to her. We got married in her Protestant church. So that was, and I was, in church, but I really didn't know the Lord.
Mm.
Um, and so it was through that process that I started to see cracks in my foundation. I didn't have, uh, didn't have a rooted faith, didn't have good discipline when it came to eating and drinking. And I was also dealing with pornography, and became, eventually with prostitutes became unfaithful to my wife.
Mm.
So here you had this rocketing business career, lots of success, lots of money, a growing family, and more and more evidence that some of the things that had affected my parents were also affecting me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was kind of a dark hour, uh, progressively darker. Eventually, after being in Australia for 4 years, they moved us to Japan. So we went to Japan, and Marianne was pregnant for our fourth child, which was our daughter, Mariel. And she was born in Japan. And my career continued up in Japan, super successful, uh, but growing kind of darkness, growing awareness of my darkness. And it all came to a head. And I would say the the real crisis of my life came to a head when we were in a 7.2 magnitude earthquake that hit Kobe, Japan. We were a mile from the epicenter, and it was then that I had a near-death experience. So
Mm.
I had just come back from the U.S. I was jet lagged. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I went out and had a run, had a shower, left for work. So we lived on a man-made island near Kobe called Roko Island. The company headquarters was 400 yards from our apartment. So our apartment was on the 28th floor. My office was on the 22nd floor. And at 5:45 in the morning, this massive earthquake hits. We're completely thrown around for 22 seconds, and a huge product display bookcase fell this far from my head, and
Mm.
it would have killed me for sure. So the earthquake stops, the building's teetering. I'm thinking, wow, the phones aren't working. I can't call my house. So I decide to go down the stairs, which are all flooded with water because they had two big water tanks up top to fight off typhoons. And so I get to my house, in my apartment. I start climbing up the stairs because the elevators aren't working. And finally, I hear my son say, "Mom, I'm really glad nobody was hurt." And so my family's walking down the stairs. Our apartment is completely trashed. The building of our apartment moved 15 feet in each direction. Thankfully, they were brand new buildings made to all the seismic specifications. But that started me on a journey to ask, what the heck am I doing here? What is the purpose of life? And it started a search. And out of the wreckage of the earthquake, I started to investigate, what is the good life? You know, what are we
Mm.
here for? And that led me over a period of about a year and a half to, I read um, all kinds of religious books, the Quran, Bible, um, the writings of the Buddha, um, the Hindu writings. I was just looking for wisdom. What is the wisdom? And right about that time, we were transferred to Hong Kong, and I was asked to introduce Tide and Crest in China. And so we went to Hong Kong. It was a difficult move because I was not all there. I was kind of in this fog trying to figure out what was going on.
Mm.
And Marianne, 4 kids, we found a place in Hong Kong, but I spent all week in China. So in those days, Britain owned Hong Kong, and the People's Republic of China was where I was working. So I would leave Sunday night and go take a train to Guangzhou. And then all week I would move around. I had 7 joint ventures with the Chinese Communist Party throughout China. I would end up in Beijing on Friday and then or Thursday night, and I would fly home, and I would have the weekend at home and then rinse and repeat back into China. So I was really, in a way, separated from my family. We had fax in those days. We could fax, I could see the kids' homework, I could talk to them on the phone, but, and I was working crazy hours, and it was in that time that on a weekend in Hong Kong at church, I was always in church. Sometimes I was
Mm.
hungover, but I was in church.
You were in church, yeah.
Yeah, and this lady gets up and says, this retreat changed my life, and so I went. I said, Marianne, I need to go on that retreat. So I went on the retreat and had a It was called the Walk to Emmaus, and I had a radical encounter with Jesus. Uh,
Mm.
and I finally understood the gospel. I finally understood that my purpose was to love God and love people. And so the weekend completely changed my life. That was 29 years ago.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, I was 38 years old, and I came out of the desert. I came out of the wilderness. I came out of the despair. I came out of the emotional bankruptcy. And I also had a real fear of the Lord about my sin. And I came out of that, and that began chapter 3, which was thankful to get out of the
Mm.
darkness and out of the
Praise God.
quagmire, um, and into the next, the next challenge, the next phase of my life. Um, and I'm just so thankful, that.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got uh, to fully understand what was going on and read enough of the Bible and met with my share group. I finally ended up talking to my wife and confessing all my sin. And she looked up at the sky and couldn't believe it. And basically, she'd been following the Lord really closely for 4 or 5 years by this time.
Mm.
And she said, well, he's forgiven everything I've ever done, so I'm going to forgive you.
Wow.
And it was then that I really knew the gospel was real and practical. I mean, I had this relationship going, but this relationship was broken. And
Mm.
so she agreed for us to start over. And we did. We started over and began a new beginning of what does it look like to live for God, and to raise up a family. What does it mean to protect my family and my
Mm.
wife? I was an absent father. I mean, I just wasn't doing my job. And thankfully, the Lord had mercy on me, and we were able to start. The kids at this stage, were 11, 9, 7, and 3. So thankfully, we were able to lead them in the way everlasting and get them focused on the Lord. And they're all following the Lord now. There's been some ups and downs, but you know, I'm just so glad that
Mm.
He brought the rest of the family along as well. And and then shortly after that, the Lord, uh, the company moved me to Cincinnati. And this was, of course, global headquarters. And I was the global head of marketing, um, as a new believer coming into Cincinnati. I had been here a lot, I mean, from meetings. And so I knew something about the city. But we found Cincinnati to be the perfect city to raise our family.
Mm.
It was big enough that it had all kinds of good stuff like the Bengals and the Reds, and eventually FC Cincinnati, and the Cincinnati Cyclones and all that. The theater, the ballet, the symphony, um, diversity. people from all over the world. Um, and, it was my, yeah, it was just amazing that we could just be in such a great place, no traffic, good schools. Um, so I just started following Jesus,
Mm.
and enjoying life in Cincinnati, raising my family. Um, I went to another retreat shortly after, and there was a bit of a prophetic component to it. And the whole point of the retreat was to identify your identity. How has God wired you, and what is your identity? And my identity that I discovered that weekend, 25 years ago, my identity was warrior father,
Mm.
warrior father. And, I I completely revamped how I parent, how I do marriage, how I protect my wife, started praying over my house, started declaring my house a haven for Jesus and casting out every enemy spirit.
Mm.
The Lord healed me from pornography. Um, he healed me from alcohol. And we just started literally doing things His way, as much as we
Yeah.
could. And the fruit was really encouraging, and so we just kept going. We just kept going, found a good church, and that was the beginning of the next chapter. And eventually, I started. I was so in love with the Bible. I loved reading the Bible. So I just started reading the Bible, and I read through the whole Bible, I don't know, a couple of times, and I started realizing, wow, God is so patient. He's so good. He's so
Mhm.
faithful. Uh, and my joy of my salvation was like double, triple, quadruple. The more I learned, and then I started taking seminary classes. Our church had a extension campus of Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Chicago, and they offered weekend classes. So I started taking some class and weeknights. I started taking some classes while I was still at P&G. And then the major fork in the road came. And the fork in
And
the
what fork
road,
is that?
the fork in the road was uh, I gradually felt the Lord calling me to preach. And I felt like He was leading me into ministry. And Marianne and I talked about it. We just waited. We kept doing our thing. We just waited. And then one day, about 5 years since I've been a believer, uh, and I was serving in my church as a Sunday school teacher and all kinds of stuff by then. But it was like, no, I want you to leave P&G. I said, what?
Mm.
Uh, so now I got, this, okay, am I really going to do this? And what are the implications of this? And so I took counsel from the men at my church, and Marianne did the same. We prayed, we fasted. And one day it was like, I want you to go in today and resign. Now, by now, this is like a 7-figure income I'm making. And, it's a very, yeah, it's just a very significant shift. But we felt the Lord was in it. Marianne got confirmation. And so on the day that the Lord said, today's the day, I went downtown and I handed in my resignation.
Mm.
And I didn't know what we were doing next exactly. I didn't know, there was no clarity. And I felt like a little bit like Abraham, he left not knowing where he was going.
Yeah.
And that my boss said, what's your plan? And I said, well, this will sound crazy, but I don't have a plan yet. I'm just supposed to take this first step. So, the company was gracious. They asked me to wait a few months so they could get my replacement, on board. And I felt like, yeah, I'll do that. And I left in great relationships, but uh, I remember leaving and sending a note to my organization, which had people all over the world, that, I'm leaving to finish seminary and to go into full-time Christian ministry. And I said, hey, by the way, this isn't for everybody. There was a lot of Christians who, like you, were police officers,
Mm-hmm.
and other leaders at P&G. There were a lot of Christians, and I would totally say, stay where you're put unless the Lord leads you to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened, and that began the next chapter.
Mm. You know what? That's it's probably a lot of weight on you and Marianne at the time. Man, what an act of faithfulness.
Yeah, yeah, it was wild,
Yeah.
because and the kids were asking, like, can I still play hockey? You know, can I still play for the golf team? Can I still, whatever. And of course, we were aware, because we had ministered to some people who had gotten so committed to their church that they kind of had abandoned their family. They were out
Mm.
every night doing church stuff, and we knew that our first responsibility was our family, and protecting and strengthening our family. And that, as we went into ministry, we had to minister out of that, a healthy marriage that God had redeemed, healthy children that God had redeemed, a healthy family that God had redeemed. And that's what you have to offer other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one thing to know a bunch of stuff, but it's another thing if you're living, and we wanted to be ministers who were living, what the Bible was saying about marriage and family and work and all the different things. So it was a really interesting time, and we went through a lot of experimentation. While I was finishing seminary, um, I ended up working with Campus Crusade for Christ in the ministry of Dr. Henry Cloud. And we learned a lot about small groups and how people grow. And his books are just so helpful. Books like Boundaries, and then he started. So working with him, he has a lot of business people that he's the counselor for, and some of them are CEOs, and some of them are so thankful for his wisdom that they invite him into their company to
Wow.
listen in and what's going on. And I could tell that, the Lord was, and he knew the Lord was shifting him into working with companies, uh, in addition to working with the church.
Mm.
And he started writing business books, and it was just a sweet season. Um, and But we knew that probably wasn't our long-term thing, and he felt like he needed to shift gears. So he started working more in the business community, and he's now just such a highly sought after management consultant, from what he knows about scriptural wisdom and what he knows about psychology.
Mm.
So, uh, and right about that time, Marianne got breast cancer. So we left Crew. Henry started doing his thing in the business realm, and I served Marianne for about a year as she went through multiple surgeries, radiation, chemotherapy. Your mom's been through
Yeah.
some of this.
Yes. Yes.
Uh, so we, and it was during that year that the Lord just gradually started talking to us about pastoral ministry in a local congregation. And it was then that, as Marianne got some healing, and returned to normal, and she's been really good ever since. Um, we started praying, and that's how we ended up at Marymount Church.
Mm.
Actually, the story is crazy. My oldest son, Dennis, was at William and Mary. That's where he went to college, and he met a girl from Cincinnati there, who at Fellowship of Christian Athletes, who came from a different high school. He didn't know her. and so they became good friends. And her dad came to visit one time because he had a conference in Washington. He's an accountant. So he comes over to get lunch, and Dennis's friend invites him to lunch with her father. So Dennis, you know, asks, "Oh, what do you do?" "I'm an accountant." And Dennis says, "Well, what else do you do?" "Well, actually, I'm the pastoral search committee chairperson for a new pastor for Marymount Church."
Mm.
And my son says, "Well, my dad's been praying and fasting about becoming a pastor of a church. Maybe you should talk to him." And that's how
Wow.
that's how I ended up at Marymount Church.
Mm.
And that turned into just one of the most amazing, experiences of our lives. Uh, and right as that was happening is when I met your dad and your mom.
Mm. Mm.
And we worked on a plan to improve marriages in the greater Cincinnati area. And we became really good friends. And shortly after, uh, the Lord led them to come to Marymount Church. And they weren't exactly thrilled about coming to a white church.
Yeah.
They were the only the only non-Caucasian people in the church. There
Mm.
might have been one or two Hispanic spouses but we were nowhere compared to where we are now.
Yeah.
And your dad, basically, uh, coached me. Your mom and dad coached us, loved the Lord, coached us, and because we grew up in Canada, and my next door neighbor was an African American from the United States who was the head of the Boys Club in Ottawa,
Mm.
and we had tons of uh, racial diversity in our high school and college because we had people coming from the Caribbean, we had people coming from Africa, we had people, and Canada has no history of slavery.
Yeah.
So I just didn't even understand the whole. I mean, I obviously was aware. I'd seen the TV series Roots and all that stuff. I was aware, but I had no idea, of how significant and how the continuing effects uh, were manifested in people's lives. And so, I had a great diversity experience at Procter and Gamble, but in the church, it was a different thing.
Yeah.
So that was one of those amazing friendships that is now we've been at it more than 20 years now, uh, following Jesus together and learning, and we're now serving on all different committees in the city to deal with some of these issues and to help the church kind of reach the next level
Yeah.
of kingdom effectiveness. So I would just say, and then Marymount was a the church they wanted transformation. They wanted more Holy Spirit. It was more of a Bible church, and so we started on it was a 20-year journey that your folks and I went through, and
Mhm.
our church. We started at with a church of about 150. Average age was about 60. And today our church is about 300, and the average age is like 35 or 40.
Wow.
And we've gone from, 10 kids to 100 kids. And, you know, uh, so it's been an amazing transformation. And there was a lot of conflict, you know, changing the worship, changing the leadership, uh, you know, having Lewis, your dad, preaching, and gradually over a period of time, the Lord was really faithful and brought a number of uh, Hispanic and African American families, and the Holy Spirit did what only the Holy Spirit could
Yeah.
do.
Hmm.
And so it was a really cool. And one of the things that was that was really noticeable about the church was, and my wife was really big on this. She loved the older women. We had a number of older women who were widows, and man, uh, we protected them, served them. We actually honored them,
Mm.
and my wife had a ministry to the older women. We would always acknowledge them in services at communion. We would invite them to come first. You know, it was just, and then we had 12 elders, and each of the elders would take one of those widows and provide, you know, visiting and support and honor, you know, celebrate their birthdays. And the same thing with our kids. You know, we had some amazing volunteers who came in to really uh, protect the kids, train the kids, you know, work with the families. Obviously, it's the family's job. Um, but that I feel like that time really led to breakthrough
Wow.
in how our church impacted the city, how our church impacted. We always were a strong mission church, so we always had a strong impact internationally. But I think over time we grew relationships with different ministries, you know, ministries to college students, ministries to athletes, ministries to young business people in the city. And so, you know, now the church, you know, spends about 20 to 25% of everything they take in to go towards mission.
Towards mission. Mm.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that led to yeah, 20 almost 20 years, and then we felt the Lord leading us to step down. And at this time, we had an associate pastor. You mentioned Jamie already, and he was just a blessing to our church. And so he felt ready to take over, and so 3 years ago I stepped down, and he took over. We left the church for about 6 months because we took a sabbatical, and we went. We did this thing in Spain where we walked 500 miles across Spain on a thing called the Camino de Santiago. We visited Israel and Turkey and Greece and tracked down the footsteps of Paul. And we
Mm.
also, but we came back, and now we've been part of the church. We gave Jamie some breathing room so he could establish his ministry.
Mm.
And so we've been back and love being part of the church, you know, like your mom and dad,
Yeah.
the other elders, the people that we've labored with for 20 years. That's our family.
Mm.
You know, that's our family. Uh, and now we've got grandchildren, you know,
Yeah.
we've got 12 grandchildren. Number 13 is coming. And
Mm.
again, with this warrior father mentality, you know, and my wife, I mean, we want to build into our grandchildren and invest in them so that they would have, you know, the knowledge of the kingdom and love for Jesus, you know. So that's our current priority, is to invest in them and keep investing in kingdom work around the city and internationally as God opens doors, but also our family.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm a warrior grandfather now.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, yeah. So
You are.
we love spending time. You know, Marianne gives uh, one grandchild 100% attention every Monday. So
Mm.
she calls it Monday with Mimi, and the kids take turns coming. And when we're in Chicago, we do the same thing with our three grandkids over there. But it's like really spending time with them, and her passion is to give them a love of reading.
Mm.
And then when they get old enough, like about middle of grade two, second grade, I start them on Papa's Bible College. So I start meeting with them about every other week for an hour and a half. And we just go through the Bible. We watch videos, we memorize scripture, we pray, show them how to have quiet time, and then, you know, continue on that in a process where we hope between the two of us, we hope by the time they're, you know, 13, 14, 15, that they will, you know, have a really good biblical worldview. They'll have a really good understanding of scripture, and they'll have their parents obviously are doing the most of the heavy lifting,
Mm-hmm.
but we want to come alongside and just encourage that. So, you know, there have been these dark seasons. There have been God's intervention, his calling into a different life, a different adventure. And now, as we're, you know, moving into uh, our 70s, we're basically, you know, continuing. And I'm thinking, you know, between the prayers of protection, the teaching of protection, uh, the investment of time and energy into those kids, that this warrior father calling I've had, you know, is a blessing, you know, to my family and what I'm trying to do. And also, you know, with the kingdom is, there's no retirement in the kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
so
Never.
we'll keep going.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's a little bit of the story.
Oh
Do you-
man, you were awesome.
oh, good. Well,
That was awesome.
does it raise any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I have a comment. You know, just
Uh-huh.
hearing your story, the your parents, right? That generation, whatever was going on there, you actually cut off whatever iniquity that was affecting or could have been affecting your family, and you
Mhm.
started something new, right?
Yeah,
Because of the decisions you made, you and Marianne,
yeah,
you specifically, because we're being educated by your story today, but your decision to follow Jesus changed the entire trajectory of your family. I mean, I
right.
see protector when you talked about your sisters, your younger sisters. I saw you being a protector then. When you decided to become like a follower of Jesus, you were protecting your family physically and spiritually, and just the entire thread of your life has been an encouragement to me. I did start reading your book. Purchased it some time ago.
Okay.
Little shameless plug for you. I would love for you to tell people where to go to purchase it at the end of the podcast. But yeah, your book is, even reading that book, I can see you being a protector throughout your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, Dennis, this was awesome. I don't have any questions for you. Just encouragement, and just just to thank you for coming on this podcast and sharing
Mhm.
your story with our listeners, man. It was an awesome story. Awesome story.
Well, thank you, Lewis. I'm really honored to be part of your new podcast. I think it's a great theme um, that we need
Mm.
in our families. And you know, it's interesting because, you know, when you follow God. So I remember hearing a message once. The question was, how much of your life really depends on God showing up? You know, and when I think about my marriage, my children, my grandchildren, uh, and the way that I pray, I'm praying for him to show up. I'm praying for him to, you know, and throughout the process, you know, there's been challenges with our own kids. There's been challenges with our grandkids. There's been all kinds of times where we've just had to, Lord, unless you do something, this isn't going to work out well. We trust you, but to really depend on God. And you mentioned the book. I got a copy of it here. You mentioned the book. This was a project that totally depended on God because I'd never written a book before, didn't know where to start, had to learn about publishing, had to learn about building a website, had to learn about obviously writing and then rewriting. Rewrote that thing about 15 times.
Mm.
It started off with about 88,000 words and it finished at 64,000 words, and that was an incredible process of learning the craft of writing because it's different than speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing a lot of speaking with sermons and stuff like that. Writing is a whole different art. And so just learning and asking God to direct me. And the book was an assignment from him while we were walking across Spain. We were talking to people about the kingdom. And he said, I want you to write a book about the kingdom for people um, who may have given up on church, but people who want more out of life. And so not a religious book. It's not a churchy book. I think it blesses people who know Jesus. I think it's because it's got scripture and stuff, but it's directed at people that do not know Christ. Mm, I'm hoping that believers will like the book and that they will give it to their non-believing friends
Mm.
and saying, "Hey, I know this guy Dennis. He's got a crazy story. You should take a look at it." I read this book. It was enjoyable and revealing, and you might find it helpful or something
Yeah.
like that. So still depending on the Lord, but He's used the book. Uh, I got a call 6 months ago from a guy in Cincinnati who somebody told him to read it and he wanted to meet with me. And
Mm.
he ended up giving his life to Christ and he ended up walking through a renewal of his marriage. And now his kids are following Christ.
Wow.
And so, if that's the Lord hasn't shown me exactly how he's used the book, but I get these little glimpses and I realize, okay, yeah, I'm just your servant. And you asked me to write this book. I said I would write it if you helped me write it, which he did. And
Mm-hmm.
now it's really his book, you know.
Wow.
So
Well, can you share with our listeners where can they purchase the book and actually the title, the name of the book?
yeah, it's called The Biggest Idea Ever. The subtitle is Trade Anxiety, Fear, and Burnout for Peace, Purpose, and Significance. Uh, and you can get it on Amazon. It's available as an ebook, an audio book, a paperback, and a hardcover, whatever you want, whatever form you want. But go to Amazon.com, The Biggest Idea Ever. And I also have a website, which is just my name, DenisBeauséjour.com. And there you can find free resources, some of my messages, and other aids to walking with Jesus.
Mm. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Dennis.
Thanks.
And Dennis, as we close, is there any words of advice that you would like to leave?
Yeah. Um, you know, the Lord said, um, you know, all things are possible with God. And the Apostle Paul said that he will do immeasurably more than all you can ask or imagine. And so I just say, trust in God, you know, swing for the fences, make your life count. And I specifically bless this podcast
Mm.
to
Thank
reach
you.
to reach thousands, and that God wants to use your obedience to doing this to reach people and
Mm.
to bless people. So that's what I bless you with, Lewis.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Dennis. Everyone, I want to thank you for joining us. We want to thank Dennis for joining us. And man, everyone, continue to love people and continue to be courageous. That's a wrap on this episode of Courageous Protectors. If you enjoyed this episode, please share this episode and podcast with your friends and family. Please encourage them to subscribe also. Let them know how much you enjoyed this podcast. We're trying to grow a community of courageous protectors. Until next time, stay strong, stay courageous, and be blessed.
That's a wrap on this episode of Courageous Protectors. We hope you've been inspired by the bravery, resilience, and dedication of what you heard today. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay strong, stay vigilant, and be blessed. Take care.